Welcome to episode 32 of the Ape and Bird NFT show. We are joined by a very, very special guest today in Sekure D. We do need to rebrand the show, similar when we had Friendly Jameson on last year, where we called it the Burb and Bird Show. Sekure D is a Moonbirds holder. So we've got a couple of birds here ready to talk all things NFTs for another week. Sekure D, my esteemed guest today, my co-host, is an artist. He has worked in streetwear and all kinds of stuff, a massive NFT enthusiast, and we're very, very excited to get into all things today. Sekure, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, Greg. Always happy to chat to you and looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we get into it, I'm sure many of the listeners will be familiar with you and some of your work. You've been a speaker at some of the Australian NFT events over the last sort of 12 months or so. But just a little bit of a high level overview of sort of what you do and what you're building at the moment.
Yeah, easy. I'll keep it short for you. So basically, I got into art when I was 18, 19, actually studied finance and finished a finance degree at uni. And by the time I finished my degree, I was actually almost like making enough to try and do art. And I was like, well, this will be a much more fun life for me than wearing a suit, which didn't really fit me very well. And you can see I'm in my 30s wearing crew necks as a uniform. So it kind of worked out well. I've lived many lives through art. I've done solo shows, museum shows, gallery shows, all kinds of things, designed toys, worked in streetwear and sportswear for three major brands, done collabs, designed footwear, you name it, I've done it. Apparel, CD covers. I feel like I've lived many different artist lives, but I traditionally will sit in like sportswear fashion world. I'm a massive sneakerhead, so a big part of my career has been spent in sneakers. And as you can tell behind me, also, designer vinyl toys. So when NFTs exploded in 2021, I'd say, like for me, when it came across my radar, already having a bit of a background in crypto, I was like, collectible JPEGs, I'm in. And then here I am still.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're excited to talk all things NFTs with you today, digital fashion, and we might even touch upon those sneakers that you spoke about in a little bit. But I think we've had a pretty sizable week in NFT land. You and I were speaking just before we came on air. Floors across the board, although crypto and ETH is pumping, floors are down, particularly the last 24 hours, which is never fun to see. But I feel like we have had a little bit of a resurgence up until the last 24 hours, but it has been a big week of news in NFT land. We're going to get into some of those topics, but I think nothing as big in my mind as what we saw with OpenSea firing back at Blur yesterday, announcing that OpenSea Pro, which is the former product of Gem, is here, and there's going to be 180,000 tokens that are available to claim. Were you able to claim yours? And just any knee-jerk reaction from this announcement yesterday?
I was not, because I was not a user of Gem, and I'm not paying 0.06 for a pass that was free, and there's 180,000 of. So I'll get it for 0.01 in about a week, I imagine. So. Yeah. Look, I think the concept of the platform is smart. I do, from a business background point of view, worry about what it'll do to their core platform, Greg. I mean, sometimes you don't grow the size of the pie, you just split it up into smaller parts. And to me, trying to manage two platforms without just making the original platform into a pro model does concern me from a usability point of view. We've seen through user behavior that although the majority of transactions and volume is being done currently on Blur, which I think will be continued to be done until the 1st of May when they do the airdrop, I think it'll be interesting to see if people flip-flop back to OpenSea after that moment in time passes, unless Blur creates some sort of engagement that continues people to use it, because there is magically in other platforms that look great as well. But I would say knee-jerk reaction was make sense. Surprised you didn't just do it to your original platform, because we have seen some pretty good upgrades to OpenSea over the last 4 or 5 months, if we're honest, from a usability point of view. So I'd say smart in one hand, concerning in the other. I think people who use Blur will transition to Magically or stay on Blur. I don't know if they're going to move over to OpenSea. I think there's this rebellious attitude in using Blur. So are people who use OpenSea going to start using OpenSea Pro? I don't know. So
yeah, I liked it. I thought it was fun. I think Blur has, up until yesterday, really had the narrative in its favor. Although I did mention on our very short show last week that NFT statistics punk 9059 that
Yeah.
does the proof daily updates did a poll sort of saying like, is Blur a net positive, negative, or neutral for the NFT space? And this is about this time last week. I think it was 60% actually said net negative. So I think up until that poll, I still felt like, and even NFT statistics mentioned it on his show, sort of saying it opened his eyes too, in the sense of at least those people that polled, the narrative seemed to be Blur's the best, and OpenSea is, just caught behind. I liked this. I think it's a good use of the acquisition that they obviously made last year. I think giving that claim to people, obviously OpenSea has had its knockers around like no token and like, what are you going to give us for, but look, you and I probably come from the same NFT era around that sort of early 2021 period. OpenSea has been pivotal for NFTs to this point. So from a bit of a nostalgic point of view, I quite like this as a little bit of a comeback story for OpenSea. I am going to use it. Ironically, I never used Gem. Well, I actually have to go back and check some wallets. I feel like I don't think I ever used it, right? So
I might have Gem on a burner.
Yeah, quite possibly. So, I've used many of the marketplaces and tested them out, but for some reason, I don't think I ever used it. So, the floor is down. You'll be happy to know the floor is down to about 0.03 now. So we're getting closer to your 0.01, but it looks like only about 80 or 90,000 of the 180 have been claimed. So you would expect that floor is going to crater even more. I think it's very interesting, but I also wanted to give a shout out to our mutual friend, GT Sewell, who definitely had a very, a balanced yet critical thread of OpenSea Pro yesterday, essentially just saying, and chime in, Sekure, if I'm getting this wrong because I'm just bringing it up here, but I think the TLDR was, in terms of showing what flaws are of certain collections, etc. GT has some really cool artist pieces from the likes of Xcopy and Josie Bellini, the artist, OG crypto artist, but then also the founder of Cyber Brokers, and it's showing, zero point 0.01 flaws and things like that. So, what was your take of GT's thread there?
I don't repost a lot, and I reposted it because I thought it was great and very reasonable. And every time I read one of GT's threads, I read it in GT's voice, which makes me smile. But yeah, I think he's bang on. But it's been a consistent issue, right? Like all our wallet valuation tools do the exact same thing. So it's very challenging. I mean, I haven't seen a wallet valuation tool yet be able to use the highest value trait as the valuation. So like a purple fur within Deadfellas, for example, like it's just going to give you a 0.35 valuation rather than maybe like a 0.89, for example. So yeah, I can see if they're sitting within a giant basket of items within a collection, how it's misrepresentative. But yeah, I think maybe it's just something to work on in the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I do want to give a shout out to the WGMI tool, which has actually been acquired by Floor App, but NFT Tomo. So WGMI, I think it might have actually been GT that was using it last year or maybe even late 2021. It was quite an early tool, but I have used that tool before. And the default setting is just to go to the floor token, but you can actually filter by attributes and see what the floor on that is. Having said that, as we know, in this sort of post-Blur era, most NFTs are sort of at that floor level. I will recognize, though, or I will say, we haven't touched on Nakamigos yet, and we will in a tick. But I've seen a lot of Nakamigos going for above floor, and back to what we said off the top with Moonbirds. You and I are holders still. I have seen some Moonbirds going for sort of 1 to 2 ETH above floor as well, which has been encouraging. And in the other collection that we've actually seen sales of, I think 7.6 and 21 ETH for some Grail MFers just a couple of hours ago. But I've also seen many MFers going, the floor's at about 0.9 at the moment, but going for like 1.5, 2 ETH. And a lot of these are being purchased off OpenSea. So again, whether that narrative is just starting to switch from Blur and sort of whether people are getting either disheartened with, airdrop farming, people getting sick of it. It does seem like it's a bit of a game for whales at this point. So people going back to the quote unquote good old days and actually going and buying sort of things that aesthetically please them, which I am all for. So let's see sort of how that plays out in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, rarity was a huge part of what actually got me into NFTs, ironically. Like I entered NFTs through One of What Art through a friend, but I hate when NFTs are treated like shitcoins. And at the moment, the way that they're traded on Blur makes them feel a lot to me like shitcoins rather than art or like PFP projects. And you can see that exactly. Like, you know, in a collection like Deadfellas, only because I referenced them before, like high value traits are meaningless at the moment, or maybe like 2x, whereas previously they were 10 or 20x, right? And you see that across the board with Cool Cats and, you know, Clone X and so many other things right now. So I agree. I think that also, like with these prices, you have the opportunity to buy something that you wanted. So you see a lot of like hoodie birds go above floor in Moonbirds, even though that specific trait doesn't add a lot to your rarity, because people like hoodie birds and you maybe couldn't afford one for 35, 40 ETH a year ago, but you know, for 5 instead of 3.5, if you have 5 ETH, you have 3.5 ETH, like is it a massive difference to that pool of ETH that you have if you can get one that you love? And I think we're going to see that more. Like Cool Cats is about to dip under 1 ETH, which is nuts. So how many cats I imagine getting bought at that 1.5 to 2.5 limit, which would have been like, you know, like real grail cats for people a year and a half ago. So I like it. I think to me, like if I buy into a PFP, I'm not buying it to flip it. I'm buying it because I personally like it or resonate with it or see a trait in it that reminds me of me. So it's encouraging. But in your commentary around 60% saying Blur is negative, and how the narrative on Twitter is that Blur's positive. Well, that's because the people only using Blur are the loud ones who are the traders with the biggest voices right now. And I think the people sitting on the wings that aren't buying are the ones that are like, Blur's been negative. The one thing I will say about that is I've had Eddie in my ear about this the last couple of weeks, and I think to some degree Blur has actually been holding up the price of the floors. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this time next month when the airdrop drops.
Yeah, so the interesting thing for me, I tend to agree. I mean, I've been a little bit nervous in the sense of like what happens when but Blur's actually not going away, right? Well, from my understanding, and when you reference Eddie, you're talking about Dancing Eddie, are you? What's Eddie's handle?
Is it Dancing Eddie? And he's I think it's Dancing Eddie _, I think.
Let's just pull that up. Yeah, at Dancing with a G at the end, Eddie EDDIE _ at the end. Yeah, Dancing Eddie. Look, I think with Blur, it's not going away. There's probably a perception that after May, and obviously it was extended the double points in this current sort of like it extended for a month, but it's going to 2027, their incentive program. It's just at the end of May, the double points drops off. So so airdrop farming and incentives of the Blur token is actually not ending at the end of May, but what is ending is the double points. So whether that acts as a disincentive for, you know, the whales and for the airdrop farmers to not give a shit as much, and do we see, maybe we don't see floors absolutely crater if Blur just went away, but maybe we see a slow bleed. I mean, I hope that's not the case, but you know, it is going to be a factor, I think.
Well, the big deficit in Matchy's trade, I can never pronounce his name properly, but like
Matchy Big Brother, yeah.
Yeah, so the deficit of loss on his trades on Moonbirds was astronomical, and if the Blur token's worth 10 cents and not $1.30, I don't think you're going to make the deficit up when you're trading that big anymore. That would just be my guess. I mean, I think last check it was sitting at about 48 to 54 cents, somewhere in there, whereas it got up to like $1.55, $1.60, something like that. So I can only imagine when they add another $300 million of liquidity to that pool that it'll probably drop further. So yeah, maybe the farming continues and maybe just not to such an astronomical level. But I think like magically it probably has the superior trading platform visually. Then you have people going back to their safe home. I think OpenSea will always have a place because of what it's meant to people to get here, and people like what is comfortable, right? So I actually didn't realize it was going to 2027, Greg. So thank you.
Yeah, the incentive program. And I think that it hasn't been quite clear, right, either, because we have seen other marketplaces like your Looks Rare that have dropped a token, right? And then there's been, you know, a pump, and there's been a there's been a bit of market share go to these places like X2Y2, but Blur seems like it's going to be hanging around. Well, its intentions on its website says
Yeah.
2027. So we will see how that plays out. So some of the other big news we had, I've got my Twitter browser open here, and I am still looking at a Dogecoin logo in the top left-hand corner, which, at this point in time, just nothing weird feels that weird anymore. I think after the last couple of years we've had with COVID and everything that's gone down. But for some reason, the Doge logo wasn't even the biggest story of yesterday when Elon actually tweeted Punk6529 sees the memes of production holding like the JPEG, which has now been deleted. I believe it was up for 6 or 7 hours.
Yeah.
I definitely saw it. I liked it. I didn't think that Elon knew. This is obviously just me guessing, but I don't think Elon knew it was actually an NFT. I just think he's probably seen it on Twitter and liked the artwork. And obviously, Elon is a shit poster. He likes his memes. I think he's been tipped off a few hours later, or read the comments and realized that he was actually, unintentionally or potentially, I don't know, pumping this NFT. And I do remember last year that Elon changed his Twitter profile pic to a collage of bored apes, of about 50 bored apes. And he didn't say anything on his Twitter feed. And I remember this is about 8 or 9 o'clock at night Australian time. So God knows what time it was in America. It would have been the middle of the night, when I just don't think Elon sleeps. And I had a few texts from people. I texted a few of my friends, including Steve, my regular co-host of this show, and said, have you seen Elon's profile pic? And there was a run on ApeCoin. ApeCoin actually pumped. There was a little bit of a dip up in sort of mutants, and I don't think bored apes moved that much because it's so expensive, obviously, to buy one. But I actually sold a little bit of ApeCoin into the pump. And then other deeds pumped a little bit as well. And within 2 hours, I would say Elon tweeted, seems kind of fungible. And then everything dropped back down again. So this had a little bit of a similar feel, although my gut on this one says he was being purposeful with the bored ape one, just sort of trolling. I think this one, he's probably just not known it was an NFT. But we did see a sale of 8 ETH for that particular, which I know you tweeted about. I think the floor was at 0.6 before the tweet. We saw a sale at 8, and we saw the floor oscillating probably between 2 and 3.5 for a couple of hours. Did you buy?
God, no. I nearly bought at 1.5 on the way up, and then I decided. So, I'm not really buying anything right now because I'm trying to fund a project, which we can talk about later. But so I'm being very frugal. If I wasn't being frugal, I would have bought in at about 1.5. But seeing an 8 ETH, I have chills, Greg. You can't see them here. Just thinking about someone getting wrecked 6.5 ETH in 2-3 hours, is horrific. If you would have asked me without giving me your opinion, I would have said the exact same thing. I think there is no circumstance in my rational brain that lets me believe that he thought that was an NFT before he tweeted that picture. No chance. And then once he saw the comments, he yanked it. So yeah, I think the Doge thing in the corner though, that's just so funny to me. The skepticism around Doge from a tinfoil hat point of view has always been that it's going to end up being a currency for Twitter, right? It's always been this undercurrent narrative and joke. I think it pumped 31% as soon as he switched it over.
Yeah.
I learned long ago that you sell the news on Doge. I bought into Doge a week before he went on to SNL, and I sold it an hour before he went on SNL, and then it created after he went on. So I think it's just him being a troll. For a fact he loves 4chan. He loves Reddit. He's a meme dude. So this was just an accident on his behalf, I think. And
well, there was a tweet that he put out yesterday, and I can actually remember this from, I think it was last year, but it was one of those meme stock account. Here it is. It's the Wall Street Bets chairman, which is actually a pretty fun account to follow, to be honest. And he said, as promised, so this is from March 26th last year. Elon said, is a new platform needed? And the Wall Street Bets chairman account said, just buy Twitter, and then change the bird logo to a Doge. and Elon said, haha, that would be sick. Well, he then retweeted that. So he is like a little kid. He is a troll, and
Yeah.
I'm here for it. I think it keeps things interesting. A lot of people I've spoke to about Elon over the last 6 to 12 months have probably have a lesser opinion of him
Yeah.
now that he's got so involved with Twitter, and each to their own. But I think things like yesterday keep things pretty interesting. So yeah, so some Elon news touching NFTs and obviously crypto. But speaking of FOMOing into things, Nakamigos have continued to be the story of the last 2 weeks. Did you get any Nakamigos? Have you felt FOMO? I know you said that you sort of like battening down the hatches, but any Migos in the wallet?
So I've spoken in Nakamigo spaces a few times this week. I want to be supportive of any community that is seeing success. So I haven't fudded them, but if anyone has bags on Nakamigos, I'd be exiting them personally. Nakami going to zero is like the joke. I think you define a project's success by how it fights back against FUD and adversity. And to Nakamigos' credit, they've come back from 0.35, 0.4 like 3 times now and got back up to the 0.6 kind of range. But I'm starting to think Beeple might be like a top signal, Greg, because every time Beeple puts out artwork on anything right now, it kind of ends up as like a negative to the success, or like the opposite of what's going to happen. So for me, look, where a lot of people get emotional about this is like no roadmap, no known artists, nothing. And like people are dumping and pumping. And you know what? Like I hear all of that. And like, do I think Deadfellas should be under Nakamigos? Like that's absurd. But nonetheless, I like to see people have wins. I would just say if you're going to play this game, get out at a 2x. Don't sit here and think it's going to 5, 6, 7. Like this isn't Goblin Town. So I'm preaching caution. When I didn't buy in at 0.1, Greg, I decided not to buy in, right? Because I'm not risking 2-3 ETH for a 2x. I'm just not right now. Yeah. So I don't believe it's going to crack an ETH and go further. I don't think it's going to go past Chimpers, Renga, MFers. I don't think it's going past these guys. So if I don't believe that, I'm not investing right now. Probably 0.45, 0.5, somewhere around there now.
0.51 right now we're sitting on. Yeah. So we saw. No, I missed it. I probably saw them around about 0.1 as well. I think it was on Saturday last week. To be honest, even though I have a Moonbird, like everyone's banging on about the art, I was just kind of like, whatever. I missed Owls. Well, I actually saw the Owls run up the Owl meme a couple of weeks ago as well. And I saw that at 0.025. And I probably, obviously in hindsight, I should have pulled the trigger on Nakamigos at 0.1. But I don't know. It's just, sometimes you're out doing stuff, right? And it's sort of like, the trade-off between living a life and degenning into something sometimes. So I know Friendly Jameson actually did quite well out of Nakamigos. So shout out to him. Boot whiffed the Nakamigos at 0.01. So Boot, you once again faded generational wealth. So shout out to Boot, who's been on the pod a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. I don't think I think I'm in a similar situation to you, Sekure. I missed them at 0.1. I sort of missed them at 0.2 again. It feels like I wouldn't be surprised if they touch 0.8 or 0.9 again, which they did about 48 hours ago. They're at 0.5 right now. But in this current market, it just doesn't feel as confident of a bet. And I've been actually eyeing off an MFer. I got very close to pulling the trigger on my first MFer the other night. I put in an offer for 1 ETH on one that I really, really liked. And unfortunately, it went for 0.06 ETH, a little bit higher. But, I've been eyeing off one of those for a long time. So that's sort of what I'm in the market for. And that's not necessarily because I think MFers are going to moon, but it just, I do feel like they're part of the NFT zeitgeist a little bit. And they've always been sort of on my radar. So, for the small amount of ETH that I'm willing to put into the market at the moment, I am actually eyeing down the MFer. But good luck to Nakamigos. I wish them well. It's interesting you mentioned Beeple. Obviously, Beeple had the one of his everydays featuring the Nakamigos and almost like praying to them. The secondary tweet was something like, it was somewhat unusual language for Beeple. I mean, some people went at him for sort of essentially pumping. I don't think I don't think he meant it. He's quite a bit of a loose unit, but he said, let's pump these babies to 1 ETH or something along those
If it gets to
lines.
1 ETH, I'll do another artwork or
Yeah,
whatever.
I'll do another one. And he's copped a bit of flack for that. And he's come out and said, I do artwork of lots of NFT collections. And that's a true statement. I mean,
100%.
I can remember back in, I think maybe June 2021, and it was the infamous, he did 2 days in a row. And the first day it was like Meebits, like winning a
Mm.
war against Bored Ape. And
Yeah.
then the next day it was like Bored Ape winning the war against Meebits. And it
Yeah.
was iconic art. Like, I think I'm going to look back at those two pieces for a long, long time. Obviously, Bored Ape won out of that. And then who would have known that Meebits eventually get acquired by, Bored Ape in Yuga Labs. So Beeple definitely does have track record of doing this type of art. But I did think the tweet was just it was probably a little too much in the language. It definitely came off as pretty shilly. So yeah.
I read it and immediately went, that's not Beeple. Like, it just felt like almost like he was just having a laugh after a beer and put it out. And I think when you get to a position of profile, everything you say is criticized, right? Kevin Rose is probably a great example of that. So,
Yeah.
It felt very unlike Beeple. The only thing I'll say is, like, in regards to the FOMO, Greg, just to wind it back like 2 minutes, is like, if people hit Owls and Nakamigos, this is like gambling. They're just telling you about the multis they hit. In order to be able to hit both of those that early, you would have hit 100 piece of shit projects in the last week, because there was nothing at 0.05 or 0.02 that really signaled that these things were going to crack off, unless you're in like this super niche alpha group that's really going to pump these things up and get them going. Like, I've seen 7 to 10 projects in the last 3 days that could have been the next Nakamigos and never got past 0.03, 0.04. To actually get that like ignition point to go from 0.04 to 0.4 is so goddamn rare. So I sit here and I go, okay, cool. Someone has 10 Nakamigos, awesome. They probably lost 4 ETH on random gambles in the last 2 weeks to get it. So that helps me measure my FOMO. So that's kind of like my personal thing where I'm sitting there going, okay, well, the rationale of having a life compared to sitting here exclusively watching the trending tab on Blur to try and snag something and get out of the 2x. And also, most intelligent people are laddering their exit, right? Like, if I get 5, I'm exiting 1 at 0.1, I'm exiting 1 at 0.2, I'm exiting 1 at 0.35, and then it gets to 0.5 and I've got 1 left. Like, I'm sitting here paying a mortgage. I ain't trying to fucking rickroll my life on Nakamigos. So, yeah.
Well, this is the interesting thing about it though, right? Like, in this global market of NFTs, we have levels of degenerates and levels of degens, and we have levels of people that have got all different types of, lifestyles. Like, for whatever, for as much as we know, the people on the other end of trades that we're making could be 16-year-old kids anywhere around the world that are still living with mum and dad, that are quite high risk, that are willing to take these bets. So I think that's what it keeps things interesting for sure. We should mention that Nakamigos, actually, if you held the end of Satoshi mint pass, you were able to claim one for free. But I believe it was only a 4-hour window. I know a few people that actually missed that. And I think, the window, as it often happens with us in Australia, if it's during the daytime in the US, particularly now we're outside of daylight saving for those living on the, in the eastern border of Australia. It's tough. I think 4 hours is not a long time. I think 24 hours should be the minimum in my mind for a global market. But that's what it was, and few people missed, and they were gone.
I'm not getting up at 3 a.m. when it's 5 degrees to mint something I'm not certain about, especially if it's a freebie. I've got the POG mint at 2 a.m. tomorrow. I don't know if I'm going to be waking up for that.
Right. Well, tell us about the POG mint. I certainly don't know about this.
It's POG Grid. It's like, we all played with POGs. Like, they're releasing an NFT project that's going to do a bunch of like stuff to support artists and have gamification and stuff built into it. I don't know the intricacies very well. Like, I've been so focused on doing my own thing, but I've come across the founder in Spaces a few times the last couple of weeks, and he chucked me on the whitelist. But it's funny to me. I missed a mint this morning because of that, and I think the whole like get up at 3 a.m. mentality is kind of cooked. But I have made a mental note to whitelist all MFers on anything I do in the future, because apparently that's a recipe for success.
Well, I gotta say, the end of Satoshi mint pass, that pumped a little bit, maybe up to about 0.12 or
Yes.
0.13 the other day, but it retraced. I'm just pulling it up. It's at
I think
0.07 right
yeah.
now. I'm probably a buyer at 0.06. I think I wouldn't mind just holding one of those. West Coast NFT are behind, well, they're the dev shop for MFers. They've done a few other big projects like Doodles, etc. I just, this is obviously nothing's financial advice on this show. We say it every week, but I just wouldn't mind having one of those in the wallet. So I may pick one of those up.
Yeah, there's a few little passes hanging around that might have some value in the short term future. Like I think even Max Payne from Xcopy pumped up to like 0.89, 0.9 the other day and has dropped back to about 0.45. And people always speculate about whether or not Max Payne's going to end up being some sort of like pass or token or generative for Xcopy, right? So I think there's a few versions depending on your proclivity to spending that is probably worth a bit of an investment.
I think it's a good point. We must have similar tastes because I've got them on the shopping list as well. I've got Max Payne and Friends by Xcopy. I've been looking at that. Number one, I just love, like, to be honest, like it's a shame that there's such a high volume of these. There's 7,500 of them. I love the art of, like, I'm an Xcopy fan, but there's some Xcopy works that don't really like resonate with me that much. I love the artwork of Max Payne and Friends. It actually ran up to 1.25.
Well, that high.
Yeah, 2 weeks ago, because it was the 1 year anniversary of Max Payne and Friends, and Xcopy gave away a one of one that essentially had 100 WETH offer on it by the time it was airdropped to the lucky wallet, that got that one of one piece. But since then, Max Payne has retraced to sort of that 0.65 to sort of 0.7 area. I think I'm not sure how much lower it gets, to be honest. It seems like it's sort of bottoming out at around that 0.6, 0.65. So shout out to anyone that is a Max Payne and Friends holder.
Greg,
So
I've owned it and sold it twice, so it'll be third time lucky if I get it again.
So you've made money on that?
Just like basically broken even or just up. Like every time I buy it, I have a bit of discretionary ETH. I grab one, and then if I need ETH for something, it's like the first thing that just because I know it's easy to sell. And like to your point, I think I saw it at 0.45. But you know how sometimes when someone puts in a dodgy offer or whatever, the collection price drops temporarily. Yeah. It probably was just that. So
absolutely. So we gave a shout out last week to Utes that made the migration from Solana to Polygon. Over the weekend, we had DeGods that completed their successful migration to Ethereum. Any thoughts on either of those projects or Frank DeGods in general?
Oh my God, I have thoughts and they're like controversial. So I actually I've never talked about Utes on any space ever, or even on my Twitter. I have to say, I actually really like the artwork in Utes. I think they look fantastic. I think they're engaging. I like the detail. I like how much all the traits match with everything else. I just really like them. I think they're great. DeGods aren't for me. I think we've seen, Greg, you might be the price expert, about a 10.5 to 8.2 somewhere price movement on DeGods.
12. They got to 12.
They got to 12.
Shortly after the migration, yeah.
So, look, I think the migration was well handled after all the communication, depending on how you view his loyalty to Solana and how he said he was never going to leave and all that sort of stuff. I find that this is where I'll probably get fudded, but I'll just be honest. I feel like there's a group of people in NFT Twitter right now that are acting like super immature, juvenile idiots. And a lot of these kind of people are attracted to projects with loud founders that are consistently available. Frank is doing something right now which is very engaging to the meta, which is being available as a founder, which if you did a year ago, people were like fudding the project because they're like, that founder's not doing anything. Get off Twitter, like go build something. Frank's actually found out and really well managed his engagement timeline over the last 4 to 5 months in a bear market to actually get people to buy into the project. My problem with projects like Utes and like a Kid Called Beast is like, it's the audience. Like it's just it's a lot of and it's not everyone in those projects by any means, but to some degree I struggle to resonate with the project's following, although I really like the artwork. I think the integration and merge was done well. I think the way that Frank just went and showed love to all these other projects and secured pieces in other projects was like honestly, like really great. I thought it was an awesome way to give everyone on NFT Twitter like a bit of momentum and light, and like I thought that was really well managed. So by no means am I judging Frank. I don't know him. Unfortunately for us, it's very late at night when he's usually on Spaces. So most of my exposure to him, it's like he's stoned or tired as shit. So I don't think I ever get him at his best. But I would say like I tend to separate myself from projects with really loud audiences, and like the youth audience is like notoriously loud. So I kind of just step away. But love the artwork. Excited to see what they're sort of building and working on in the future. But there is a lot of people in the space right now that have a lot of really big opinions about other projects, and I think they're either setting themselves up to be heroes or villains in the next 6 months. So it'll be really interesting to see how a few of these things play out.
Absolutely. I agree with you on the Utes artwork. I quite like that more than the DeGods art. Have, obviously a higher supply at 15,000 than the DeGods, which was the original project. I probably don't have as many Utes on my timeline. I know Jards, who's the guy from the
Yeah, he's
NRL
great.
that was he's got a Ute. There's a few people I know that have got a Ute. I probably haven't seen as much. I haven't spent a lot of time on Spaces of recent times, so I haven't seen maybe the negativity of the Utes community. I had a little bit of a Twitter raid on one of my posts, I think a week or two ago, around Utes, and it was funny. I got reasonable vibes from the replies, but I got to say, one of the things I've learnt over the last, say, 1-2 years is I try to keep saying to myself, what game am I playing? And I have tried to play a game that often hasn't fit in with the current meta,
Yeah.
or I've been left holding the bag when the meta has changed. So one of the things I'm trying to get a little bit better at, and I certainly am not there yet, I think it'll always be an evolving thing, is to actually constantly reassess what game am I playing. And often for me, like if I was buying a Ute, I think there would be some short-term upside in terms of maybe, a few more followers on Twitter, a little bit of engagement, just getting to know different community. But I would most likely be buying that for, hopefully a higher price in whether it's a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever it might be. So for me, I want to have a few bets this year on founders and projects that I think are milking the current meta.
Yeah.
So I hear you loud and clear on Frank, and I think, he's younger, he's like a young hustler. You've got other founders like Kevin and Justin, and then even the Doodles founders that have obviously had their line of controversy over the last sort of month as well. And they're sort of a little bit more behind the scenes now, ducking the head down a little bit, behind the scenes building and working while we hope. I think there's something to be said for maybe being that louder in an attention economy, right? At least in the current meta. So I wouldn't mind having something in the bag that Frank is behind, because I think he plays the internet game very, very well. So I'm a buyer for Utes. Not yet. It's at 1.85 right now. Actually, the one that's at floor is quite nice. So yeah, I'm going to keep my eye on Utes. But I think, shout out to Frank, who I'm sure was having a lot of nervous jitters before the migration of both collections from Solana.
Sure.
So if you're doing well out of those projects, good for you.
Yeah,
All right.
look, I mean, I never judge a project by a couple of people, right? It's so easy to do that.
Yeah.
So, like, there's 3 things I'm looking at the moment. Well, 2, I'll give a shout out at the end of the space, because I still remember the first time I hear you speak, and you gave a shout out to Founder Brokers, and I've always remembered that. So I've got 1 or 2 in the bag for the end of our chat today. But Sappy Seals, MFers, and Utes are kind of on my list at the moment for that reason. I actually nearly bought a Ute the other day for 2.4 because I really liked it.
Yeah.
So watching them just slide a bit, I'm just going to wait another week, see where they get to, because it's some of my favorite art in the space. And I need to dig into Sappy Seals a little bit more to get a bit of an idea. I know our friends have them, but I nearly bought one at 1. I think they're about 0.75, about 0.8, 0.82, something like that at the moment. Just going to keep an eye on it. I don't know if I need to ARF every day on Twitter, but if they're on the way back up, I might ride that train.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into other side. Other side, other deeds. I still have other deeds, but I've got to say, over the last couple of hours, I've been trying to figure out what I need to do, and I believe the
Mm,
TLDR is we have now got other side vessels. We've also got the decoupling of the Kodas. So if
yeah.
you're lucky enough to get a Koda, I actually have an artifact that has on my piece of BAYC land that has got a jar of Coda fart. So I missed out on the Coda itself, but I got a jar of Coda fart. So if something has ever summed up the Yuga ecosystem and BAYC, it's the fact that I have a jar of Coda farts. But we've got other side vessels. We have got other side expanded, I believe it is. But you actually have to burn your original other deed. I believe this is the case. And apologies, I'm giving any false information. Make sure you go to the at other side meta Twitter account to make sure you're getting the proper information, because I did not want to be telling you what to do if I'm wrong. But I'm bringing this up now. So we're down. We've got sitting at 1.75 ETH floor for regular other deeds.
Yeah.
But this is essentially, it looks to me, Secure, that we are getting two more NFTs as part of this process. One being vessels, and one being another piece of land. It looks like.
You and I should start a communication agencies company for NFT projects to just TLDR, make beautiful, simple graphics and quick, snappy 2-minute videos on what the hell people are doing, because things are so confusing for no reason at the moment. But I think I saw NFT statistics say this yesterday, Greg, and I thought it was bang on and something I hadn't thought about. But any danger that the new contract's going to have royalties enforced? Because I have a feeling like, with Other Side being one of the most churned projects of all time and being able to do so on Blur and not enforce royalties, I wonder if they've blocked royalties off on the new contract.
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently, there was actually a little Easter egg left in the contract that is just classic Gordon and Gaga saying Gaga goo or something like that. I saw a Twitter thread on it before that supposedly would have cost people a couple of extra cents in gas, but they've put it in there. They've put it in there as a little bit of a troll. So I can't actually remember who threaded that, but it was he had an Azuki PFP and about 20,000 followers. But I've just pulled up here, and I think that's a great point, Secure. We are still in a world of Twitter threads. Everything's got to be a Twitter thread for an announcement. I actually saw one of our other fellow Moonbird holders, Lakos, actually said that, why aren't we having sort of infographics and other things that are, more in the theme of a TLDR. So it is interesting. I can actually see here, I've pulled up the other deed expanded. So I'm just reading the description here. It says, these evolved other deeds enable holders to play future games in the Yuga Labs universe. Each possesses its own unique blend of environment and sediment. Some contain resources and some are home to powerful artifacts. So all holders of other deed expanded NFTs are subject to this license agreement, et cetera, et cetera. So right now, the floor for other deed expanded is sitting at 1.12. The floor for vessels are sitting at 0.39. And surprisingly, because I would think that the original other deeds might lose a little bit of value in terms of their floor now that we have more supply, they are holding up at about 1.75 right now, at least for the floor ones. And we do know with Other Side, I am lucky enough still to hold, I can't remember what the actual chemical goo is one of the sediments, but I essentially have BAYC lands where there's only 10,000 of the 100,000 in that particular collection. So I am hoping that the floor stays up on that one. I think I had an offer for 5 ETH yesterday, actually, on my Other Side, or 5 WETH on my regular Other Side land. So it's pretty crazy. I mean, we're down to 85,000 items now. So we've obviously had 15,000 burnt. As I'm saying this out loud, Secure, this is going to be the biggest rambling segment of the show because I am trying to process things in real time. I have said a couple of minutes ago, I believe that you're getting 2 new NFTs. I think I need to correct myself on that and say it looks like, given the supply is going down on the other deed for other side, it looks like you will be getting a replacement piece
Yeah.
of other deed land, and you'll get the vessel. So I want to correct myself because I think I've butchered that a couple of minutes ago. So I got to say, that somewhat worries me as a holder, because the floor for this new expanded collection is zero point 0.6 below
Mhm.
the OG collection. And here's my other little gripe. Although I had a conversation with a few people in a Twitter DM today, we're a month out from the mint, or just actually under a month out. For tax purposes, and I don't know the full story here, and logic would say if you're burning a token, even
Yeah.
say the Moonbirds hoodie one that we saw a few weeks ago, if you're burning a token to redeem something else and you're actually not cashing in, you're not taking any
Mm.
profits or loss, you're just sort of moving one token to another. Um, I think logically that shouldn't be a taxable event. Having said
Mm.
that, there are people out there that say you're disposing of an asset, so that is a taxable event. So here in Australia, if you're about to burn your token and it's 11 months and 1 week, you are 3 weeks away from the capital gains 50% discount, and you're potentially going to be burning a token where you might be up for the full whack. So all of these things are a nuisance, to be honest,
Yeah.
in NFT land. They're like a little bit of a grey cloud that's always lingering over my head when I'm trying to make decisions in a fast-paced world. But just an observation.
Well, maybe you could just take that 5 week ordering offer and get yourself 10 Nakamigos, say.
Well, maybe. There we go. Financial advice from Sekure D. I like it. So anyway, I've got to figure out this other side new claim a little bit better, because I think I've butchered that. But we'll check back in on that next week. But make sure you go to the other side Twitter account and get the proper details, not like from me. Uh, let's talk about Proof and Moonbirds. I think last week Secure was the first episode in quite some time that we didn't actually talk anything Proof or Moonbirds, which might be music to some of our listeners' ears. But we've had a couple of announcements in the last week or so around Proof, and then
Yeah.
obviously with Moonbirds Diamond Nest upcoming too, where I believe Beeple is actually going to be one of the artists. Secure, you're obviously very entrenched into the artist community. You have been for many decades. Firstly, just give us your sort of 30-second overview of the new direction of Moonbirds being, essentially in the direction of being an art collector PFP.
So Dancing Eddie that we spoke about earlier sold his Moonbird this week to NY Doorman, who is now the owner of Starcatchers, because he said he's not in NFTs for art. So I think that that's a perfectly valid point, and he's a trader. So he's in NFTs to make flips and trade and work for himself on, I would say, like longer and shorter term benefit from an investment point of view. As someone who got into the NFT space inspired by art and artists, I personally like the direction. I think that it probably could have been, it could have come about 6 or 9 months earlier, Greg. I think the challenge is the timeline around which it has been demonstrated for me, and also the potential perceived lack of investment compared to capital VC investment and accrual of funds that they have got through secondary and mint to justify this being the direction that the brand's going. Because you would argue you don't need $300-500 million worth of capital to become an art project, right? So here's my concept in 30 seconds. My concept for Proof is that they become the modern museum of digital art online. And the difference between a museum and a gallery is museums display art, galleries sell art. No, you don't have a lot of crossover there, right? Museums have gift shops, but they don't sell the art. I think if the path that we see them building is that they become the mecca or home for digital art and digital artists online, I believe in my heart, and what I'm holding my Moonbird for, is that I believe that Moonbird will give me pass and access to things that I might not get outside of ownership of that Moonbird. And the reason that I got into NFTs was access to art and artists. So I believe that based on that assumption, that my Moonbird will continue to hold value. I think that the Diamond Nest being called an exhibition is a bit of a green light to that concept. I also think that we'll probably dump after Diamond Nest because people have held their birds for all this time and being told that there isn't necessarily any more reward past Diamond specifically. Like there might be, there might not. It's kind of the last nesting reward. So I think we'll probably get a bit of a dump in price then. But to see them doing the partnership with Transient Labs on Outliers and then also on their Evolving Pixels curated exhibition, I think all the pieces are there, Greg, for this to make like perfect sense about like supporting artists and being a platform to, I would say, expose artists to a greater scale and be a voice for artists in the art space. Now, like I said, you don't need $400 million or $500 million worth of dollars to do that. I'm trying to separate my potential future value and access from that, and I'm hoping that something else comes in the background to support that. But from my side, seeing them partner with Beeple, Tiffatron, Tyrell, like all these people already, they have big name people coming on board as part of the Proof ecosystem already. And if my Moonbird is currently worth, I don't know what it's worth, Greg, today, 3.2, something like that.
Yeah.
Like I don't have a Proof pass, but if I can get 5 or 6 Proof Grail level things over the next year or two, then I believe that my value in the Moonbird, outside of its specific value to itself, is worth holding. That's what's keeping me in Moonbirds currently. So as I see the roster of artists that they are accruing, if I see the fact that they are doing exhibitions, curated artist exhibitions, and I asked Kevin about this on a space, I was like, mate, like, what are we going to see from like curated exhibition point of view? Are you going to be able to platform artists, or is this all just going to be your mates, basically? And he's like, no, we're going to give the keys to exhibitions to artists to do exhibitions for their art friends and to bring people up and to give them an opportunity to grow people's profiles into being maybe the next Mapan or whatever, right? So I think for me, I see opportunity and excitement. I see the puzzle pieces. I don't see all the puzzle pieces being put together to see the final puzzle yet, if that makes sense. But I think there's enough there for me to hold on to it and be excited about what's coming. And if you actually look at the cadence of announcements that they've made over the last 2 weeks, it's been a lot of shit. Like, it's outside of the Japan trip and everything, like Transient's partnership into the Moving Pixels exhibition, into the curated exhibition, into, we only know 2 of 14 artists, I think, for Diamond Nest, and that's only like, 13 days away. That's a lot of art news, like, in 2-3 weeks. And I think the one thing, like, one of the amazing things NFT Statistics does is he talks about art and detail. Stevie's now doing an AI art show every day. I think, like, they're really signaling the direction, and it's a direction that I believe has held up incredibly well through the bear as well. Like, art has held up well. So for me, like, I think it's exciting. If you are in Moonbirds to get airdrops, to, you know, get another PFP, to move on, well, we've already seen that that's not working because the price of oddities, which held at 1 ETH forever, is what, like 0.38 or something right now. So I think it just depends on your perspective. I'm trying to take the perspective of a little bit more age and experience art collector on this one, not a PFP flipper, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, and I think it's good to hear a differing opinion, because I think we've had a lot of FUD around Proof and Moonbirds. I would like to think my quote unquote FUD has been quite measured. I did a very, very, very from the heart take after the Proof Pass just cratered about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I actually recorded that the night before their big announcement, essentially saying this is the Moonbird's new direction. I actually sold a Moonbird that night after I recorded the pod, which was always going to be my plan. You know, that pod probably served as a little bit of a therapy session for me. It was an individual recorded one, but you know, look, I think I'm a round tripper with Proof, as in I've gone from the beginning all the way up and ridden it all the way down. Other than that sort of Moonbird that I sold, the Proof Pass has had a little bit of a bounce, not
back
much.
Up to like 14 or something, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been 1 or 2 sales at 14, but you know, it has been good to see that. You know, I think it got down to as low as about mid 8s, 9s, etc. So that had a little bit of a bump. And look, Moonbird's got up to about 3.7, 3.8 the other day. It's back down to about 3.2. So there's been a little bit of a rebound there. The thing that I've probably been quite disappointed in. And look, I always try to put myself in the other person's shoes, because I don't think it was I think it was a very hard situation to handle. But I got to say, the communication was poor. It was
Yes.
very, very poor. The way that the way that they treated a lot of the Proof Collective that had been in there from day one. I always think of other collections and sort of Genesis holders, or, in the terms of the Yuga ecosystem, if you're a BAYC, like, it was unprecedented for me to think. And yes, the counter to this could be, well, it was always going to sunset after 3 years to pass. When I minted, did I know that? Yes, I did. But as I said on that show about 4 weeks ago or so, that Moonbirds existed because Proof Collective caught fire. They wanted a PFP for the Proof Collective because they didn't want people on Twitter. No one wanted to use this card. And the success of the Proof Collective gave Moonbirds that sprint out of the gate. Then it was a lot to do with timing. Moonbirds sort of hit it right at the peak. We had 2 weeks after Moonbirds was other side, and then we were sort of like down only with NFTs. So a lot of people bought in at the top of Moonbirds. A lot of people bought Proof Collective passes for an ungodly amount. And I know that, Kevin probably took that to heart with some of the criticism that of people, the misalignment of expectations when someone's bought a pass at 60 ETH.
Yes.
I've bought at 1, someone's bought a Moonbird at 47. Someone else has bought at 3 in the last couple of weeks, or 4, and their expectation is, okay, this is great. I'm on board for this art direction. And maybe there needed to be this natural sort of culling of older collectors or past collectors into new collectors that are aligned with this vision. But I gotta say, the comms and even some of the tweets I still see are a little bit cringe to me. They lack empathy, I think, of people that have bought in, and it's sort of like, oh, we've actually got our shit together now and decided the direction we're going in, and it's like, yeah, art, like cheerleading so hard for art. And I think that's good, but it also just, I don't know, particularly in the Discord, I think it's lacked a lot of empathy. There's actually been some staff members in there that have come in, and I won't name names, that have almost said, like, essentially, like, I'd just get over it, right? Like, it was almost the equivalent of floor it and get the fuck out, which is what, Poopy got all the heat from. So I got to say, that's been pretty poor, and I think that needs to improve 100%.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's so hard to, and we're in new territory, right? And like, I try and lead with positivity. Like, I'm not like this like overly positive guru person. I'm actually quite self-deprecating and negative if you have a beer with me, but I try and make people laugh the whole time. But like, I have a lot of sympathy for people who bought in at AF, but I also feel like a percentage of those people, Greg, like, need to own their decision to make the purchase as well. Like, I'll give you an example. I bought a Monolith 2 for 3.3 ETH. I woke up one day and Artifact just decided that wasn't worth shit anymore and burnt it for a Trillium Lace engine that was worth 0.1 that actually just gave me the right to spend 0.4 to buy a pair of shoes. I made the decision to buy the Monolith 2. Now, yes, Artifact hyped that up, and yes, there was, they had babushka dolled the Monolith 1, so we all thought it was going to happen with Monolith 2. I don't want to talk about Artifact, but like, that was my mistake, and I still hold on to that negativity. But that's where Nakamigos has the green light right now. They don't have these people that have bought in at 0.923 and a floor that's totally created that's dumping on top of them, because the loudest voices on Twitter are often the negative ones, right? They get the engagement, they get the feedback, so they constantly appear on your feed. I think that it probably could have been more well managed. I think Kevin does this thing where he's genuinely excited so much, and he comes across as trying to be like this nice guy all the time. But sometimes I'm like, I would rather not hear from you at all. As like selfish as that is as an investor, even though we're not investors, we own JPEGs. But like, I would almost rather you just like come out with your formal statement once a month and hit your milestone meetings rather than jump on spaces and people up. Because I think that's where people get this like disconnect in the two. But I agree. I don't go in the Discord much. I try and drop into the art channel now it exists. But yeah, I think a lot of these projects are suffering the same thing, Greg. And like, I think it's a hard thing to manage. If someone spends $400,000 on something that someone else spent $4,000 on, making both those groups of people feel like they own value is a near impossible task.
I agree that it's near impossible. I think what I'll just get off my soapbox after this final take, but I think the hypocrisy though of some people that are in, and this is not just step two to Proof and Moonbirds, the hypocrisy of saying, don't talk about flaw, right?
Yeah.
And we're not about flaw and we're not about flaw. So we don't want to talk about flaw in our project, even though we've ridden a speculation wave before days of Blur. We've made all this money from secondary royalties. We've said things we haven't delivered on. And again, this is not just exclusive to Proof and Moonbirds. We've said these things, we've pumped it up, we've juiced it up, we've frothed it up. People have acted on this information. They've bought at very high prices. And then they get a little bit disappointed because things aren't delivered. And they talk about flaws cratering and bad comms and this and that. And they get told, we're not a project that talks about flaw. Then the people that are talking in those discords or on Twitter threads saying we don't talk about flaw, within 1 hour, we'll be talking about the Chromie Squiggles flaw or some other flaw on an art project or a PFP project saying, I hope we've hit the bottom or whatever it might be. So there's a massive hypocrisy that I find very, very cringe. And I am leaning towards more being a little bit more salty towards some of this behavior than where I feel like I've probably given it too much of a pass in sort of yesteryear and yestermonths. So, I think, again, it's not easy being in those situations, but you sometimes have to take yourself out of it and go, if you're in that project and if you're a staff member or a founder or whatever, and go, I'm saying this one thing, but my behavior is the other thing, right? So, I agree with you that there needs to be, and I am a round tripper of Proof. I have few mates that have made a lot of money from Proof and Moonbirds, and they sold maybe not the top, but they sold, at a decent level. And I don't hold any ill will to them, or, I'm not beating myself up over it every day. Like, it is what it is, and I'm responsible. I agree with you. But at the same time, I feel like, a lot of these founders have been able to set themselves up and, cash in on the speculation, cash in on the frothiness, and then to sort of turn their back on their community and say, oh, well, we're sort of sick of the speculation and, stop talking about flaw and stuff. There's a lot of hypocrisy there.
I'm with you. I don't disagree with anything you said. I think for me, one of the things I speak about, and I spoke about this in a DeGods space the other day and kind of no one agreed. And I was like, look, I actually think the space is bereft of like some maturity in regards to communication, project management, and outcome. And I'll use a brand like Nike, for example, Greg. Like, you're allowed to have social media if you work at Nike, but every social media profile you have says, I work at Nike and these are not like the beliefs or comments of Nike. And I think to some degree there needs to be a separation of personal and company like voice in our social media from these projects, and currently they're not. They're uniforms. So it's very hard for you to tell if a moderator is posting on behalf of a project, on behalf of personal belief. And I think this is where like I get excited about like where we can go in the future and the ways that we can improve. And by no means am I saying like I want to have a workflow like my Web 2 job, but like there is a lot that we can learn on and learn from that can improve the way that these things operate. And I think separation of tone of voice is really important, and that comes back to comms. And I think once we learn as an entity, as more of these like professional experienced people come into the space to take over projects, to take over, agency, to take over management, we will get better at, because I'm the same. I'll see someone tweet something from a project account. I'll be like, did they mean to post that from a personal account? Because it's just so out of the ordinary. And I think people haven't realized, a lot of founders don't have that experience yet. So yeah, I'm with you.
All right. I'll be off my soapbox now, and let's get on to the next topic. Sekure, let's transition actually into your project. This is not going to be a shill fest, and I know you're not that type of guy anyway, but RoboGhost, I've learned a little bit about them. You're obviously a really, really credible artist with a lot of experience, both in sort of digital art, physical art, etc. Just give us sort of the rundown. What is RoboGhost and why are you building this?
Yeah, I actually didn't speak about it at either of my last two commitments that I've been at with you. I kind of just, I don't obviously lead with it because I think my last 2.5 years is about being trying to add value rather than like sell my own projects or anything. So I'll keep it pretty brief. But essentially, like 20 years ago when I was studying finance, I got drunk watching Donnie Darko one night, and I was a graffiti artist. So I used to paint trains at night and then go to uni in the morning. And I was like, I'm just going to end up being a robot. Like, I just don't want to do a financial career. It's not for me. And then I was watching Donnie, and then I was like, what happens if you die and you're just a robot? And I started just like doodling robot ghosts. And at the same time, my custom sneaker career was exploding. And for me as an artist, I want to be an artist that people can recognize your work without your signature in the corner, like Kors or like Takashi Murakami, right? They don't require a signature in the corner to be identified. So I set out to write a narrative after all the vodka that I could take that night, and wrote like a 3-page story about these characters called Robo Ghosts, and it became the IP for my entire 20-year career. So these characters are for the first time through the project coming to life, and it is exciting for me because no one really knows they exist. But if you own any of my products or any of my collabs from the last 20 years, it's a very good chance you own a part of the story. Like my Jordan brand collab, the footbed was all Robo Ghost arms. The Globe shoe boxes were all covered in Robo Ghosts. The Kid Robot toy box was all covered in Robo Ghosts. So I've been seeding the narrative over the last like 15, 20 years. And essentially it's a PFP project, and we'll have the bells and whistles of PFP projects. It's going to be a small project. We've got a Genesis series that's currently 2/3 through minting. We're releasing it in 3 stages called Sneaker Cards. And the idea, Greg, is that like I'm not trying to revolutionize the world, right? Like for me, the PFP project will be based on art and sneakers, 2 things that I'm extremely valid in and I have a lot of experience in. Still paint and work on shoes every day. So we want to drive like excitement and engage that community from a sneaker point of view, because I think the overlap's going to be massive. Then what we'll do after a 6 to 12 month roadmap, and it'll all be declared up front, and I'm not going to say what all the roadmap is now because I don't want to waste everyone's time, but it'll essentially transition into an artist holder pass for me and the rest of my career, and everything I do will be focused on driving value back to people that supported me early and were part of the Robo Ghost journey. So yes, we've got shoe collabs. Yes, we've got artist collabs. Yes, we have merch. Yes, we have all that stuff. But realistically for me, the price is going to be a pretty low entry price because it's about supporting me on my journey. And like the first 10 years of my career were graffiti and sneakers. Then it went into vinyl toys. Now for me, I think like the third phase of my career is really focusing almost exclusively on digital art. And for me, it's about like supporting the transition of my career and being part of that journey as a holder. So I think that's where a lot of artists are going to utilize NFTs to mobilize a community moving forward. And a lot of the projects that I get the most value in, Greg, right now are like 0.02, 0.03 projects with artists behind them that are in their Discord every day, that are making cool shit, giving it away to people in the Discord and just providing value or support or direction. And to your point, I've worked with Nike, Addy, Lego, Disney, Puma, Converse, like you name it, right? Like Kid Robot, Medicom. Like over my career, I've had a pretty extensive experience level from brand direction to producing shoes in a factory in China. Like I've done all of it. So I think that I can add value to that community that comes along for the ride too. And whether it's, you know, Acidverse or Bad Bunnies or Gen Z, which are 3 projects I just love that I mentioned that are sub 0.05, have people that are supporting them in that direction and have awesome communities. And I used to run a forum that had 550,000 members. Like I know how to run a forum and provide value and make people feel a part of it. So that's kind of the idea. We'll release when the time's right. I'm not releasing anything right now, but we're doing the Genesis series, and it's been great just to connect with people and build an organic relationship before we blow up. So hopefully that was under 2 or 3 minutes.
No, love it. And where can people go to find out more? What's your Twitter handle?
Oh, it's Robo Ghosts. It's like Robo Ghosts on everything or Sekure D on everything. I've got all my handles on just about everything. So you can find us there, and hopefully you like the art. And if you don't, it doesn't have to be for you. So that's okay.
No, that's great. Thank you for that overview. Look, we had on our item. We're going a little bit overboard in time, but we did have digital fashion. You're obviously a bit of a guru in that space with some experience. But I mean, let me throw one question at you around digital fashion, because we see a lot of stuff that sort of talks about, you know, metaverse and you know, wear this on your avatar and et cetera, and the future it's going to be $1 trillion industry. where do you think we are in terms of the adoption curve of people actually giving a shit to spend, $50, $100, $150 on a digital fashion item versus a physical fashion item?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a lot of beliefs in this. So I have actually spent a significant part of my life working in global brands, and whether it's brand direction or collab or merchandising or so I kind of feel like I know the numbers and I know the market capacity, and that's across all sports, collabs, style, and esport. So I think I have a pretty good experience, Brett, to make comment on this. So for me, Greg, where are we at? We're 2 out of 100. We're right at the beginning. I don't like saying early. We're at the beginning, right? But when you consider the money that's spent on Fortnite, for example, on digital wearables, I think that is where we need to get our mind over just having random shit in our wallets. So I'll give you an example. A sneakerhead, maybe you have 400 pairs of shoes. You know where they are? They're in my garage, Greg. No one knows I've got them.
Yeah.
But if I can buy a pair of sneakers in the future and it comes with a digital collectible that goes in my wallet, then I have the opportunity, which a lot of sneakerheads are, to flex their collection. You have a beautiful way to display what you own. And maybe part of like On Cyber's galleries become like sneaker display galleries or merchandise galleries. And maybe that's what you can do in your CloneX pods, those space pods in the future. You can actually display your collections of things. I think that, when the NFL can make $60 million in 48 hours selling logos on t-shirts in Fortnite, the use case for digital collectibles exists. I think for me, there needs to be one or two things to happen. I think that AR and VR need to be connected to the digital wearables to add additional value so that I can use it as a Snapchat filter or an Instagram filter and connect my wardrobe to my AR VR filter so that I can implement that element into my in real life experience. And I think that there needs to be some form of interoperability. I'll give you like another example. I think that obviously Nike, Puma, all these brands have like NBA 2K partnerships, all that sort of stuff, right? Nike has Dot Swoosh out. I think that for me, like a great version of this experience is that I go to buy the new Mellow 2. I get a digital version of the Mellow 2 through a like redemption station or code. And then when I log into NBA 2K, I can play in that pair of shoes because I own it. To me, I think that this is where like the value comes from. And if we want to talk about where Nike get the value from, holy shit, I'm going to give you some big numbers, right? It's like, by 2030, they think it's going to be like a $30 billion industry on sneaker resale alone. So who's to say that the sneakers app, rather than just distributing 30,000 pairs of Travis Scott Air Jordan 1s, doesn't sell you the digital tokens first, which then can be traded for 6 months before they're redeemed to actually send you the shoe. So then Nike can get a 5 to 10% cut on royalties of all those secondary sales over the lifespan of that shoe before it's produced. I get chills thinking about it, Greg. The opportunities for expansion of global companies through financial new revenue streams are not like widely available when you're at that scale. But esport has never been able to be commercialized by brands super well. And now through, I think, the lens of digital collectibles and interoperability, you will have that opportunity. But I also think the way that people buy shit, stick it in their wardrobe, which most people with rooms that look like this have, like me. I mean, you come to my house, you're seeing half the collection at best. We have a version of a life that we can exist where we can display those items now. And, people were minting Artifact Air Force Ones for 0.3, not knowing whether or not they were going to be forgeable or not. That's 6 times the price of an in real life Air Force One. And I can tell you nobody who's a sneakerhead knows about Artifact yet. It's so small. So I think, where are we? We're like on 2 out of 100, but a year and a half ago we were on 0. And I think the expediency that we'll experience from 2 to 50 will be astronomical compared to the time it took us to get from 0 to 2. And it's one of the beliefs I have in clones. It's the reason I'm still shitty. I lost 3 ETH on a Monolith 2, but the reason I look at the price of clones every day is because when Nike became a skate brand in the early 2000s, everyone thought they were culture vultures and they were going to ruin their brand. They're the biggest skate brand in the world right now. So I think that digital collectibles, through the lens of digital metaverse fashion shows that are existing, through the opportunities that link you to sustainability, Greg, if I have the opportunity to wear a digital collectible through an AR or VR and try it on before I buy it, it's 11 times more expensive to process the return of a product than it is to send it out. Not to mention all products that have to be destroyed through being soiled or the packaging that's damaged. the sustainability element on this is actually massive as well. Like there's so
Can
many.
can you just repeat that 11 times?
It's 11
So
times
for
more expensive to process the return of a product than it is to send it out in the first place. Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah.
So I'm full of useless facts because I've been a part of a lot of warehouses. So, like, for me, it makes a lot of sense that all of these things are coming. And if you log on to a lot of like streetwear sites right now, like they're offering you like digital wearables, like you can try it on. There's a lot of apps where you can, if you look at the Nike Dunk that Artifact launched, like you could look at your feet on your phone and see it on your feet. You can see the hoodie kick out the wings, right? Like we're inching closer and closer towards it. Am I going to have a digital wardrobe that's as big as mine? Maybe not, but do I think when I go to SneakerCon in 5 years, if I wear a pair of Apple glasses, I'll see half the audience in digital wearables connected to their clothing? I believe that. So I think it's really exciting. And if you look at what all these high-end brands have done in the last like 6 months, they're not slowing down. And there's one thing that like Gucci and Prada and all these brands do, is they take risks early. They were using digital influencers in 2016. So
Yeah.
I think we're on the path, and I think we'll get there pretty quickly.
Amazing take. Yeah. I think one of the points you touched on around the ability to flex or display whatever word you want to use, essentially your wardrobe that is very rarely seen by anyone else other than people in your own home, is such an important one. And I think about even the ticketing, and we've seen this
Yeah.
influx of IRL events. I can remember when Facebook Live came out, I think around that 2013-14 era. I was working at golf at the time. We were the first ever professional golf tournament to actually stream through Facebook Live. And I can remember the hysteria of social media, the ability to do live video off your phone and platform it on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. And it's like, people are just going to watch everything from home because, people are going to be streaming this thing. And really the inverse happened. It became that you wanted to go to events to tag yourself at that venue, and to actually show that you were at this event, and to essentially gain clout that you were at this popular event that
Yeah.
everyone else was at, or as a desirable thing. And I think that's what it's going to play out with NFTs, right? Whether it's sort of tickets of things that you've attended, whether it's digital fashion that you're talking about. What we do need is more on cybers, but we need actually a critical mass of people that are utilizing these things. And that's why I do think that, platforms like Instagram will come back to the table. And at minimum, they're going to be some type of display platform, because, when you think about the evolution of even Instagram as a product, we've gone from just a standard grid.
Yeah.
And then we had them copy Snapchat and sort of do the stories features. And then we've had Reels, and we've had all these other iterations of Instagram. And to me, the evolution of social media and the evolution of showing who we are, portraying who we want to be, is going to be showing our NFTs. And often the counterpoint I get from that is like, oh, I have so much shit in my OpenSea and hidden folders. And it's like, no, this is going to be a curated experience,
Yeah.
right? Similar to what I'm looking at your shelves behind you. You're putting some of the stuff that you want to display, the best of the best there. I'm sure you got plenty of other stuff in the garage. It is a curated display. So I think that's a very, very interesting thing. All right, let's start to wrap up. Thank you very much for that take. I'm going to listen to that back. I think you dropped some amazing nuggets of gold in that particular segment on digital fashion. I did want to actually talk about, just for 10 seconds, VeeCon tickets. So I believe if you have a VeeCon ticket, I went last year, VeeCon Series 1, there's going to be something Gary has promised for nearly a year now.
Yeah.
There's going to be a collab with Snoop. There was a video that went out before. Death Row Records logo was on the video. And here's the crazy thing of the world of NFT tickets, and we're going to clip this in 5 or 10 years, Sekure. We are actually looking at a floor of 0.12 for VeeCon 2023 ticket, which is in a month. I am no longer going. I'm cancelling that trip because of the proof thing cancelling and yada, yada, yada. But 0.12 to attend 2023 VeeCon. The event hasn't happened yet. 2022 VeeCon ticket is at 0.14. It is higher floor, and you can no longer use that ticket to get into the conference. But what is it juiced up on? It is juiced up on speculation of what is coming for the Snoop ticket. So here is the interesting thing about NFT tickets. It's adding value. It's adding utility after the fact. So anyone out there in brand land that's scratching their head going, why is a ticket stub that is now invalid for a conference worth more than a conference that hasn't happened? It's because it's an NFT ticket. So come and speak to Sekure about that.
Greg, did you see my thread about cinema tickets that I put up the other night? I did like almost an exact thread spinning off how
I missed that, but I'm gonna check that out after this show.
I think it's the perfect way to rejuvenate the cinema experience. But I like your mic drop moment. It's very good. I look forward to it. And Snoop, he was wearing a Bored Ape Yacht Club embroidered jacket at WrestleMania on the weekend. So he's
Dr.
not...
Bombay. Dr.
Yeah.
Bombay, he's used that to use the IP. One of the very few people that have actually used IP from their NFTs. All right, so that is the end of the show. I will actually give one last plug, and I think you're on that list now, Sekure. But I very rarely plug anything outside of our own ecosystem here at the Ape and Bird Show. But I really like John Carlo from Midnight Labs, and you're probably familiar with his YouTube videos. He has a new newsletter called Mint or Skip. It is quite beefy. There's a lot in it. But I would actually say for the pure degen plays and just having an idea of like what's coming down the pipe, I think it's one of the better newsletters out there. So head to John Carlo's Twitter. I'm sure there's a link there, or you can just DM me either. But I've found that a pretty valuable newsletter. I can't say I read every single one of them because it seems like they're coming in volume at the moment. But I've always liked John Carlo's style, and I think the newsletter's handy. So if you're not aware of that, you are now. All right, as we say every week, nothing you've heard on this show is financial advice, including Sekure telling me to buy 10 Nakamigos for an other side.
Don't clip it.
For another side land. This show is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Thank you so much, Sekure, for joining us. At Sekure D is your Twitter handle. Hopefully we can get you back on a show in the future. We didn't talk about sports NFTs today. We've sort of run out of time, but both Steve and I are massive sports head, massive NFTs heads, and we obviously all share that common passion thread there. So I'd love to get you back on a future show. And thank you so much for joining us, Sekure, on episode 32.
Thank you very much for having me, Greg. Always fun.
Absolutely. And thank you to our listeners. We will be back next week with the special Larry Bird Show, episode 33. Have a good day. Have a good week. And we'll see you back here next week.
Thanks, mate.